Hey, Doc, we better back up. We don't have enough road to get up to 88. Roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads.
Now get this, the Pennsylvania Turnpike is the most expensive toll road in the world. Now that's according to...
Pennsylvania is full of amazing scenery. As you travel down the highways in Pennsylvania, you soon realize there is a ton of history around this place to learn about right down these old country roads. During the colonial and revolutionary eras in American history, inland travel was slow, difficult, and expensive. The King's Highways, established by Pennsylvania's colonial governments, followed and improved ancient Indian paths, but hardly allowed for freight wagons or anything beyond single-file trains of pack horses. Inhabitants of the colony were required by law, passed in 1683, to work on the construction of roads and bridges or pay a fee. But maintenance of the King's Highways was sporadic. Beginning in the 1790s, Pennsylvania and the rest of the new nation embarked on a massive road-building campaign to improve inland trade and open marketplaces in hard-to-reach areas. 3 types of new roads appeared during what historians now call the Turnpike era. The first and most durable roads of crushed stone proved to be the best suited for the often harsh weather of the eastern United States. Opened in 1794, the Philadelphia and Lancaster Turnpike was the first extended example of these new paved roads.
If you could even give them the name road, we would consider them trails at best, such as the Wilderness Trail. Like these are ancient Indian trails, and they were widened to some extent, but they were made by the feet that trod them. Whereas in beginning shortly after 1800, they began making real roads. And one of the first examples of this was the Philadelphia-Lancaster Turnpike in Pennsylvania.
It was also the nation's first major toll road. Stretching more than 60 miles between 2 communities, the pike became a major artery for the commercial travel within the Commonwealth and a gateway for travel westward. Other early turnpikes employed wood rather than stone in their construction. Corduroy roads were fairly common in the western part of Pennsylvania and were employed by the military in both the French and Indian War and the Revolutionary War. They involved logs laid perpendicular to the roadway covered by soil. They provided better traction than simple dirt roads, but proved to be difficult to maintain. Wooden plank roads required even more challenging maintenance. These were wood roads made of thick, flat planks placed in the direction of the road and supported by cross beams. They were easier to drive over than corduroy roads, but were much more costly to repair and maintain. On all of these early roads, the Conestoga wagons became a major part of the vehicles for transporting goods and resettling families. Originally developed in the middle of the 18th century, these large wagons had curved bottoms that helped prevent supplies from spilling out during the often bumpy journeys. Their use in the westward movement by settlers would make them an enduring symbol of the early American frontier. Lincoln Highway, Route 30. The Lincoln Highway enters Pennsylvania from the east, crossing the Delaware River into Mooresville. Traveling southwest, it parallels US 1 to Philadelphia. Then turning west, the Lincoln Highway follows the old Lancaster Pike Road. This route is now numbered US 30. The highway continues west along US 30 through Lancaster, York, Gettysburg, Chambersburg, Breezewood, Bedford, Greensburg, and into Pittsburgh, leaving the state west of Beaver. The Lincoln Highway Heritage Corridor is marked with the route through 200 miles in south-central Pennsylvania. The Lincoln Highway was the first transcontinental highway in the United States designed for automobiles, stretching over 3,000 miles from New York City to San Francisco. Dedicated in 1913, the highway was originally called the Coast to Coast Rock Highway, but was renamed to honor President Abraham Lincoln for its patriotic appeal. The National Road, also known as the Cumberland Road or National Turnpike, was the first federally funded United States highway. Constructed between 1811 and 1837, the 620-mile road ran from Cumberland, Maryland to Vandalia, Illinois, connecting the Potomac and Ohio rivers. The National Road played a significant role in the development of the United States by promoting westward expansion. The road opened the Ohio River Valley and Midwest to settlement and commerce. In November 1753, 21-year-old George Washington first traveled an old Native American path over the rugged Appalachian Mountains. It was called Nemacolin's Path and began at the junction of Wills Creek and the Potomac River, at the site of present-day Cumberland, Maryland. The path then traversed a series of mountain peaks through endless forest to the forks of the Ohio, the meeting place of the Allegheny, Monongahela, and Ohio rivers, now Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Washington traveled as an emissary on behalf of Virginia. He carried an order for the French military to withdraw from the fertile Ohio country, which had been claimed by both the British and French crowns. Many tribes of Native Americans, primarily the Six Nations of the Iroquois and the Delawares, also claimed these lands. All sides were willing to shed blood to secure their rights. The Braddock Road had been opened by the Ohio Company in 1751 between Fort Cumberland. The limit of navigation on the upper Potomac River and the French military station at Fort Duquesne at the forks of the Ohio River and the confluence of the Allegheny and Monongahela rivers, an important trading and military point where Pittsburgh stands. It received its name during the colonial era French and Indian War, when it was constructed by British General Edward Braddock, who was accompanied by Colonel George Washington of the Virginia Militia Regiment in the ill-fated July 1755 Braddock expedition, an attempt to assault the French-held Fort Duquesne. In 1755, the Nemacolin Path became Braddock's Road in honor of British General Edward Braddock, who led a costly expedition against the French at the forks of the Ohio. General Braddock widened the path into a 110-mile road for his army of siege guns, field pieces, 200 wagons, and 220 troops. It was an epic maneuver in the summer plagued by heat and drought. Forbes Road. The French and Indian War ended in this region in 1758 when General John Forbes marched an army westward across Pennsylvania and captured Fort Duquesne. Forbes purposely avoided Braddock's Road, which was longer and had fallen to despair. But Braddock's Road was not to be forgotten. It would soon become a major route for the settlers heading west to the new town of Pittsburgh and on into the Ohio country. It would form the basis of the first National Pike, which went on to become U.S. Route 40 and then U.S. Route 68. Today, anyone who has traveled the Pennsylvania Turnpike between Harrisburg and Pittsburgh has followed the basic footsteps of Forbes's army. You will find many Forbes's Road markers that historically document the path General John Forbes journeyed with his army. Most of the markers indicate where Forbes established a camp or a fort for the purposes of defense and resupply of the army. The Forbes expedition was a British military campaign to capture Fort Duquesne, led by Brigadier General John Forbes in 1758 during the French and Indian War. While advancing the fort, the expedition built the Forbes Road. In many respects, Forbes Road is a misnomer. Colonel James Byrd did most of the initial work from Fort Loudon to Raystown, or Bedford, Pennsylvania, in preparation for a major supply route southwest to connect to Braddock's Road in 1755. Colonel Henry Bouquet improved upon Bird's Road in 1758 and extended it to Ligonier, Pennsylvania, where he constructed the last major fortification on the road before the forks of the Ohio. From Ligonier, a rough trail was blazed through the Pennsylvania wilderness to the smoldering remnants of Fort Duquesne, with a more substantial, slightly southern route to follow later. Forbes, who suffered intestinal illness, directed most of the proceedings from a position well in the rear, though he was on hand to take possession of Fort Duquesne in 1758. Forbes's route passed through southern Pennsylvania, the most productive farmland in the colonies. Food, wagons, horses, and cattle were abundant. A claim sparsely settled Maryland and Northern Virginia could make. While Braddock's road was essentially a portage path between major watersheds, the Potomac, Youghiogheny, and Monongahela rivers, Forbes's road would stay the high ground and encounter no major river crossings, thus avoiding the attendant problems of flooding, deep valleys, and exposure to ambush by Native Americans. Like many wilderness roads, there were often several generally parallel tracks, a new one carved when an old one became impassable or a better route determined. Consequently, modern efforts to trace the original Forbes Road may be an exercise in frustration. Early maps of Forbes Road are of varying utility, some are flatly incorrect. While the National Road US 40 largely follows Braddock's Road across the Appalachian Mountains from Cumberland into Pittsburgh, Forbes Road through the south-central Pennsylvania occasionally dissolves into a morass of speculation from Rohr's Gap on the Allegheny front west of Shelburne to Murraysville, Pennsylvania, with only a few certain locators. In most of the general sense, the Pennsylvania Turnpike follows the trend of Forbes Road west from Carlisle, Pennsylvania to near Monroeville, Pennsylvania, just east of Pittsburgh. A slightly more accurate rendition of Forbes Road may be achieved by following U.S. Route 30 from Chambersburg to the junction of State Route 66 west of Greensburg, then north onto the ladder of U.S. 22 east of Murraysville. U.S. 22 west eventually connects with Penn Avenue, which may be followed to the site of Fort Duquesne and Fort Pitt. Several historical markers may be found along this route. The improved turnpike system that developed early in the 19th century Pennsylvania became a swift mode of travel, but it came at some price. The problem was profit. Private companies managed the roads and needed to recoup their investments. They collected tolls every 5 or 10 miles with a complicated system of rates based upon season, vehicle type, and produce being transported. The results were higher costs and new frustrations, a trend that plagues Pennsylvania roads to this day.
Well, that's it for this video. And if you like this video and videos like this, please be sure to consider to subscribe to the channel. Hit that red subscribe button and hit that like button. The thumbs up button tells everybody this is a decent video. And if you really like it, go ahead and share it with your friends. Sharing, liking, and subscribing helps the frontier create more content. Thanks, guys. And always remember to get out there and explore, because history isn't a mystery when you explore.